I never expected the night to end like this. I thought it was just another regular evening, but that moment, everything changed. John Miller stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone, gripping it tight, as if he could somehow will the message on the screen to disappear. His heart raced as he read the words again, the shock settling in. It was from an unknown number. She didn't come home last night. We need to talk. The message felt like a punch to the gut. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it. He couldn't believe what he was reading. His wife, Sarah, was the woman he trusted with his life. They had been married for 12 years, and yet, here he was, holding a message that shattered everything. The house was still, too still. The clock ticked on the wall, mocking him. He had tried to reach Sarah all night. No reply, just silence. His mind wandered back to their routine life, the way it all seemed so perfect from the outside. A beautiful house, a stable job, and a young son who brought so much joy. But now, everything felt like a lie. John knew something was wrong long before this moment. Sarah had been distant lately. She worked late more often, barely noticing him when she came home. Their conversations had become shallow, just about the day-to-day things. He had tried to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase, but deep down, he felt it. He felt the space growing between them, the disconnect that had slowly started to consume their marriage. And now this, a message from a stranger. We need to talk. John's thoughts spiraled as he walked over to the living room window, looking out into the quiet night. The streetlights flickered, casting a dim light over the empty driveway. Where was she? The woman he had spent years building a life with, now gone without a trace. He felt the weight of betrayal press down on him. He had given everything to this relationship, and now he was left with nothing but questions. As the minutes stretched into hours, John knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it. No matter what it took. John couldn't sleep. The minutes dragged on, but sleep was nowhere to be found. He kept staring at his phone, waiting for something to change, anything. The message from the night before kept replaying in his mind. We need to talk. He had read it over and over, hoping somehow it would make sense. But it didn't. It wasn't even Sarah's number. Who was this? Why didn't she come home last night? Was she all right? A million questions swirled in his mind. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from Sarah. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up, barely able to steady his breath. Hello, he answered, his voice calm but strained. There was a moment of silence on the other end before Sarah's voice came through, cold and distant. John, we need to talk. What do you mean, Sarah? His voice faltered, but he tried to keep it together. I'm on my way home now, she replied, but there was no comfort in her words. It wasn't reassuring. Where were you last night? John asked, his voice tightening. He could feel his pulse quicken, his grip on the phone tightening. I couldn't come home. I stayed with a friend, she said, her voice shaky, but still guarded. John felt the lie hang in the air between them. He could hear the hesitation, the uncertainty in her voice. It didn't add up. What do you mean, a friend? He asked, struggling to keep the calm in his voice. He had to know the truth. But Sarah didn't answer right away. It's complicated, John, she said. The words stung more than they should have. Complicated. John's voice cracked, but he quickly cleared his throat, forcing the emotion back down. You didn't come home, Sarah? You didn't answer my calls. You didn't text me. You didn't even bother to tell me where you were. How is that complicated? He felt the frustration rising, but it wasn't just the anger. It was the pain, the feeling that something had shifted, something he hadn't seen coming. He had been blind to it. I'm sorry, she said, but it wasn't enough. The words were hollow, the apology weak. It didn't feel like she meant it. John swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it harder to breathe. No, he replied quietly. You're not sorry. You're lying to me, Sarah. She was quiet for a long moment, and for the first time, John realized that she wasn't even trying to defend herself. She wasn't even trying to explain. It was like she had already made up her mind. It was like she knew she had already lost him. I don't know what to say, John, Sarah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to do. Then don't say anything at all, John replied, his voice now filled with coldness. I've had enough. The call ended with the sound of Sarah's breathing, but there was no more hope in it. No more love, no more connection. Just distance. He stared at his phone for a few more seconds before tossing it on the table, his mind racing. He needed to think. He needed to figure out what to do next. The woman he had loved for over a decade was lying to him, keeping secrets, and now, she wasn't even trying to save what they had. John stood up, pacing across the living room. He glanced at the clock. It was already well past midnight. He should have been asleep hours ago. But now, everything felt different. The life he thought he had, the life they had built together, was slipping away, and he couldn't stop it. He ran his hands through his hair in frustration, his thoughts spiraling out of control. Sarah had been distant for weeks now. He had noticed it. The late nights at work, the disappearing texts, the lack of affection. But he had ignored it. He had told himself it was just stress, that it would pass. But it hadn't. And now, it was too late. The damage was done. John needed answers. He couldn't go on like this, not with the uncertainty hanging over him. He had to find out what had really happened, what was really going on with Sarah. But how? Where could he even begin? The weight of the situation hit him all at once. The trust, the loyalty, the love he thought they shared. It was all gone, and all that was left was a feeling of betrayal that cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. John grabbed his coat from the back of the chair and walked to the door. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay here any longer. Not like this. Not with everything falling apart. John walked out of the house, the cool night air hitting him like a slap to the face. He didn't know where he was going, but the emptiness of his home was too much to bear. He needed space. He needed to think. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, doubt, and anger. How had it come to this? The perfect life, the perfect marriage, shattered by a simple message. He couldn't stop replaying Sarah's words in his head. I stayed with a friend. Who was this friend? Why couldn't she just be honest with him? His chest tightened as he walked through the quiet streets, the sound of his boots echoing in the night. Everything felt off. The world around him seemed to be moving in slow motion, like he was stuck in a dream he couldn't wake up from. He thought about the good times, the moments they had shared before everything started to change. He remembered their first date, the way Sarah had looked at him with those bright green eyes, the way she made him feel like he was the most important person in the world. But now, it was like that person was gone. The distance between them had grown so wide, and John had been blind to it. As he walked, he thought about what to do next. Should he confront her? Should he just let it go? But he knew deep down that he couldn't just let it go. This wasn't something that could be ignored. There was no going back now. He had to know the truth. John took out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. His finger hovered over Sarah's contact. He had so many questions, but part of him was afraid of what he might hear. The fear of the truth was almost too much to bear. But then again, what was worse? Living with the uncertainty? Or finally hearing what was really going on? He couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. With a deep breath, he dialed her number. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. John. Sarah's voice was quiet, tentative, as if she wasn't sure how to start. Sarah, where were you last night? John's voice was steady, but inside, his heart was pounding. He could hear her take a sharp breath before responding. I told you I stayed. With a friend. She paused, the silence stretching between them. It's not what you think, John. Then tell me what I should think, Sarah. What's really going on? He couldn't hold back the frustration any longer. I don't know what to say, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it, Sarah. You tell me the truth. All of it. The words came out harsher than he intended, but he didn't care. He needed to hear the truth. John, I'm sorry. I've messed everything up, she said, the guilt in her voice unmistakable. John closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. You don't even know how much this hurts, do you? He asked quietly. I gave you everything, Sarah. I trusted you. She was silent for a long moment. Then, she spoke again, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. John let out a long sigh, feeling the anger, the pain, the betrayal rise up inside him. He was tired of the lies. He was tired of being kept in the dark. Then why didn't you tell me, Sarah? Why did you keep this from me? The question hung in the air between them, but Sarah didn't answer right away. I don't know, she whispered finally. I didn't know how. The truth hit John like a cold wave, washing over him. His hands shook as he stood there, the phone still pressed to his ear. Well, now I know, he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet determination. And I don't think I can forgive you for this. Sarah didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, suffocating. John didn't know what else to say. He had gotten his answer. It was over. He could feel it in his bones. The love they once had was gone, replaced by something darker, something that couldn't be undone. He ended the call without another word, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. There was no going back. John sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound in the otherwise still night. His phone sat beside him, its screen dark, but the weight of the conversation he just had with Sarah pressed down on him. It had been hours since the call ended, but he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered. He had hoped that somewhere, deep down, Sarah would come to her senses, that she would be the woman he married, the woman who would fight for their family. But now, everything felt hollow. He didn't know where to go from here. His mind kept replaying the same questions, the same doubts. Was there any chance of salvaging their marriage? Or had it all been a lie from the start? Sarah's words echoed in his head. I didn't know how to fix this. But what if it was already too broken to fix? He thought about the years they spent building a life together, the trips, the shared dreams, the promises made. And now, it all felt like a distant memory. Sarah had chosen to stay with her friend, leaving him in the dark, alone with nothing but unanswered questions. The silence in the car was deafening, and John knew he couldn't stay in it any longer. He needed answers. He needed closure. But he wasn't sure where to find it. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. He couldn't keep ignoring the obvious cracks in their relationship. John took a deep breath and started the engine. His heart was racing, but he wasn't sure if it was from anger or fear. He drove aimlessly through the streets, the familiar roads now feeling foreign to him. He passed the park where he used to take his son on weekends, the coffee shop where he and Sarah used to sit for hours, talking about nothing and everything. All of it felt so far away now. As he drove, his thoughts drifted back to the last few months. The late nights Sarah had spent at work, the sudden distance between them, the way she barely noticed him anymore. He had tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just stress, that she was busy with her career. But now, looking back, he realized how naive he had been. The signs were all there. He just hadn't wanted to see them. John glanced at his phone, debating whether he should call Sarah again. But he stopped himself. He wasn't sure what he'd even say. The truth was, he was tired of the lies, tired of the empty apologies that meant nothing. He didn't want to hear her tell him she was sorry again, not when the trust was already shattered. As he turned down another familiar street, his phone buzzed in his hand. It was a message from an unknown number. His stomach dropped as he read it. I saw her last night. She's been seeing someone else. The message sent a chill through him. Who was this? What did they know? And why hadn't Sarah been honest with him? John's mind raced. He knew he had to get to the bottom of this. He couldn't let it go. He had to confront Sarah again, face the truth, whatever it was. But as he read the message over and over, a sinking feeling settled in his chest. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He needed to know everything, no matter how much it hurt. John parked his car on the side of the road and sat there for a moment, letting the weight of everything wash over him. The man he had been before, the man who trusted his wife without question, felt like a stranger now. He wasn't that man anymore. He couldn't be. The silence in the car was overwhelming, but it gave him the clarity he needed. It was time to take control. He couldn't keep waiting for Sarah to change. He had to take matters into his own hands. He had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. John sat in his car, staring at the message from the unknown number. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. The words on the screen burned into his mind. I saw her last night. She's been seeing someone else. It was like a bomb had gone off in his chest. He had already suspected something, but seeing it written out in black and white made it all too real. His mind raced, trying to piece it all together. Who was this person? Why had they decided to reach out to him now? The questions swirled around in his head, and his heart pounded in his chest. Was Sarah really seeing someone else? How long had this been going on? Was he just a fool, blind to the truth? John knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to find out who this person was. He couldn't go back to the life he had before, pretending everything was fine when it was all falling apart. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Sarah calling. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say, but he knew he couldn't keep avoiding this. He had to face her. He swiped the screen to answer the call, holding his breath as the line clicked open. John. Sarah's voice was tentative, shaky. Where are you? She sounded like she didn't know how to start, and that made the situation worse. "I'm on my way to you," he said, his voice calm but full of determination. "We need to talk." He could hear Sarah's breath catch on the other end. "John, please, don't do this. We can talk about this when I get home." But John wasn't going to wait. He wasn't going to be strung along anymore. "No, Sarah," he said, his voice sharper now. "We're talking now. I need answers. I know what's been going on." There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again. "John, I didn't want you to find out like this." "How did you think I would find out?" John asked, his voice cold. "You thought you could keep this hidden forever? You thought I wouldn't notice?" He felt the anger rising inside him. He couldn't help it. He had trusted her, given her everything, and now she had betrayed him. "John, please, just let me explain," Sarah pleaded. "No more explanations, Sarah," John interrupted, his heart pounding in his chest. "I've heard enough. The truth is right there in front of me. You've been seeing someone else, and I deserve to know who." He let the silence hang in the air, his chest tight with the weight of everything he had just discovered. Sarah didn't respond at first. Then, he heard her voice again, softer this time, almost like she was giving up. "It's Adam," she said quietly. "He's been someone I've been working with. It started as just a friendship, but it turned into more." The word stung, but John wasn't surprised. Deep down, he had known. He had felt it, that distance, that coldness between them. He had just refused to see it. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice steady. "A few months," Sarah admitted, her voice barely a whisper. John felt a rush of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but he kept them all inside. He didn't want to show her the pain she had caused him. "Not yet. You've been lying to me for months?" he asked, his voice low. "How could you do this?" "I never meant to hurt you, John," Sarah said, her voice shaking. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you." John shook his head, disbelief washing over him. "So, you thought the best way to fix it was to keep it a secret? To keep lying to me?" His mind was reeling, trying to process everything. "I trusted you, Sarah," he said quietly, the pain in his voice now unmistakable. "I thought we were a team. But you've been keeping secrets from me. You've been building a life with someone else while I've been left in the dark." There was nothing more to say. The damage had been done. Sarah had chosen her path, and now John had to choose his. "I need time," he said, his voice firm. "I need to think about what I'm going to do next. But don't think this is something we can fix. Not after everything." The line went silent, and for a moment, John just sat there in the car, the weight of the situation settling in. He had given everything to Sarah. He had been there for her, supported her through everything. And now, it felt like none of it mattered. John ended the call, not waiting for Sarah to respond. He had his answer now, and there was no turning back. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. He couldn't keep living in the shadows of her lies. John couldn't sit still. The minutes turned into hours, and his mind continued to race. He was exhausted, but the sleep he desperately needed wouldn't come. The weight of the past few days had left him mentally drained, yet there was no peace to be found. His thoughts kept turning back to Sarah and Adam, replaying every conversation, every little sign he had missed. The sting of betrayal lingered in his chest, and it was hard to breathe without feeling it. John leaned back in his chair, looking around his home, now feeling foreign. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love felt empty. Hollow. He thought about the future. What would his life look like now? His entire world had been built around Sarah, their son, and the idea that they were a family. But now, everything had changed. John needed to act. He couldn't sit back and let this happen to him. He had to make a decision, and that decision couldn't wait. He grabbed his phone again, dialing the number he had been avoiding. His hand shook as it rang. When Sarah finally picked up, her voice was soft, almost timid. "John," she said. "We need to talk," he replied, his voice firm. There was a long pause, and for a moment, John wasn't sure if she was going to say anything at all. "I can't keep doing this, Sarah," he finally said. "I can't keep living like this, pretending everything is fine. I deserve more than lies." She didn't respond right away. John could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, and it made the silence between them feel even heavier. "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with guilt. "I never meant to hurt you. I don't know how to fix this." John's chest tightened. "You can't fix this. It's done, Sarah. It's over." The words were harder to say than he expected, but he knew they had to be said. He couldn't keep holding on to something that was already broken. I'm not going to beg you to stay. John continued, his voice cold but calm. I'm done being in the dark. I need to move on, for my sake. He felt the finality of his decision settle in. There was no going back now. Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke again. John, please, don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. The words felt hollow. How could she still say she loved him after everything? How could she ask him to forgive her when she had already made her choice? No, Sarah, John said, shaking his head even though she couldn't see him. You made your choice. And now I have to make mine. It's time for both of us to move on. The call ended, leaving John alone in the silence of his house. He sat there for a long time, the weight of the decision settling on him. It was over. He had made up his mind, but the hurt still lingered. He wasn't sure how he would move forward, but he knew he had no other choice. The life he had known was gone. It was time to build something new. The road ahead wasn't clear, but John had taken the first step. Now, all he had to do was keep moving forward. John spent the next few days in a blur, moving through the motions, but never really feeling present. He worked, he ate, he tried to focus on the things that needed his attention, but his mind was always somewhere else. The message from Sarah, the phone call, the betrayal, it all played over and over again in his head. He tried to make sense of it, but the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. It had been days since the call ended, and he still couldn't shake the feeling of loss. It was like someone had taken something vital from him, and no matter how much he tried to fill the empty space, it remained. Sarah had reached out a couple of times since then, but John couldn't bring himself to answer. He knew what she wanted, forgiveness, a second chance. But how could he give her that when she had already betrayed him in the worst way possible? He had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away for someone else. John's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his best friend, Mark. You good, man? Haven't heard from you in a few days. Let me know if you need to talk. John stared at the message for a moment. Mark had been there for him through thick and thin, always the one to offer a listening ear. He had been a constant support throughout John's life. But now, John didn't know how to reach out. What could he possibly say? What words could explain what he was going through? He was lost. He was drowning in his own emotions, unable to find a way out. But maybe it was time to face it, time to confront the truth, time to admit that he couldn't do this alone. John picked up his phone and typed back. I'm not okay. Can we talk? Mark's reply came quickly. Of course. I'm here for you, whenever you're ready. John took a deep breath and set his phone down. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was the first step toward understanding what he needed to do next. He couldn't keep running away from this. The pain was too heavy to ignore. John knew that he had to face it head on, no matter how much it hurt. A few hours later, he sat across from Mark in their usual spot at the coffee shop. The familiar scent of brewed coffee filled the air, but today, it didn't bring him the comfort it once did. Mark looked at him with a concerned expression, his brows furrowed. Talk to me, man, he said, his voice gentle but firm. John took a long breath, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped his cup. He didn't know where to start, but somehow, the words began to come out. I don't know what to do, Mark. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought my life was good, you know? But then Sarah, she did this. She. John paused, his throat tight with emotion. He wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting to break down in front of his friend. Mark waited patiently, his silence encouraging John to continue. She's been seeing someone else. I don't know how long it's been going on, but it doesn't matter now. The trust is gone, and I don't know how to move forward. I don't even know who I am anymore. Mark sat back in his chair, nodding slowly. I can't imagine how much this hurts, John. But I know you're strong. You'll get through this. John looked up at Mark, meeting his friend's gaze. I don't feel strong, Mark. I feel like I've lost everything. I don't even know what to do next. I feel empty. Mark leaned forward, his eyes filled with understanding. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. It's okay to be lost for a while. What you're going through is hard, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. We'll figure it out together. John nodded, feeling a slight weight lift off his shoulders. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. Maybe he could find a way to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but with Mark's support, John knew he could take the next step. He wasn't ready to forgive Sarah yet, but maybe, just maybe, he could start to forgive himself. John woke up the next morning with a heaviness in his chest that had become all too familiar. The silence in his house felt suffocating, and though the sun was shining brightly outside, inside, everything seemed dark. His mind still raced with thoughts of Sarah, her betrayal, and the path ahead. But something had shifted in him. He wasn't the same man he was just a week ago. He had taken the first step by talking to Mark, and now, it was time to take the next one. The truth was, he didn't know what he was supposed to do. He didn't know how to fix the mess that had become his life, but he knew he couldn't keep living in this limbo. It was time to stop letting the past define him. He couldn't change what Sarah had done, but he could control how he moved forward. John stood up from his bed, his body sore from the weight of the emotional toll, but he felt a sense of determination that he hadn't felt in days. He was ready to face the truth head-on. As he got dressed and started his day, he couldn't help but think about the conversation he had with Mark. His friend had been right. It was okay to be lost, to not have all the answers. John had spent too much time trying to hold everything together, thinking that he needed to have control over every aspect of his life. But he was human, and sometimes, life didn't go the way you planned. He walked into the kitchen, making himself a cup of coffee. The quiet hum of the machine was the only sound in the room, and for a moment, he allowed himself to sit with the silence. It was strange, this peace. It was like the calm before the storm, but John realized that maybe it wasn't the storm he needed to fear. Maybe it was the aftermath, the rebuilding. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to start somewhere. He grabbed his phone and stared at it for a long time, the weight of the decision heavy in his hands. Sarah had called a few times, but he hadn't picked up. He didn't know if he was ready to talk to her yet. Maybe he would be, but not today. He wasn't sure what he would say, but deep down, he knew he didn't owe her an explanation. He had to focus on himself now. John put his phone down and decided to go for a walk. The fresh air outside felt like a breath of life, and he welcomed it. As he walked down the street, he couldn't help but notice how everything seemed so ordinary. The neighbors were out walking their dogs. Children were riding bikes down the street, and life seemed to be moving on. It made him realize something important. Life didn't stop just because his world had been turned upside down. It was hard, but John had to keep moving. He couldn't let the pain define him. He had to rebuild his life. When he returned home, he sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pen. It was time to start taking action. He made a list of everything he needed to do: call a lawyer, talk to a therapist, figure out the next steps for his future. It wasn't much, but it was a start. John felt something shift inside him as he wrote. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew he could face it. And for the first time in a long time, he believed that he deserved happiness again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but John was ready for it. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew he would find them, one step at a time. John woke up early the next morning, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in weeks. The previous day had been a turning point for him. He had finally stopped trying to hold on to something that was already broken. He had let go of the pain, the betrayal, and the uncertainty that had clouded his mind. Now, it was time to focus on rebuilding, on moving forward. The weight of the past few months still hung over him, but John knew that he couldn't let it define him. He had a future to look toward, and it was one that didn't include Sarah. As he made himself a cup of coffee, John sat by the window and thought about what the next steps would be. He had made a list of things he needed to do, and today he was going to start checking them off. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. He had to take control of his life again. The first thing on his list was to see a lawyer. He knew that the divorce process wasn't going to be quick or painless, but it was the only way forward. As much as it hurt, he couldn't keep living in this limbo. He had to protect himself and his future. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of a lawyer he had found online. It rang a few times before someone answered. "Hello, this is Jennifer. How can I help you?" Her voice was calm, professional, and it gave John a sense of reassurance. "Hi, my name is John Miller. I need to speak with someone about a divorce," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness he felt. "Of course, Mr. Miller. Let me schedule a consultation for you. I'll send over some paperwork beforehand, so we can get started as soon as possible." John felt a small wave of relief. He was taking the first step, and that felt empowering. The next task on his list was to find a therapist. He knew that he couldn't do this on his own, that he needed professional help to navigate the emotions he was dealing with. The pain of betrayal was something he couldn't just push aside. He had to work through it. He quickly searched online and found a therapist who specialized in helping people through difficult breakups. He made the call, set up an appointment, and was surprised by how quickly he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. As he sat back, thinking about everything he had accomplished that morning, John realized something important. He wasn't alone anymore. He had taken control of his life, and he was ready to heal. There was a long road ahead, but it wasn't an impossible one. He wasn't going to let Sarah's betrayal define him. He wasn't going to let the past keep him in the dark. He was going to rise above it, one step at a time.